When we speak of knowing someone is meant for you, it is not the kind of knowing that comes from checklist compatibility, shared hobbies, or carefully crafted online profiles. It is something much older, something that precedes logic. It arises from a place within you that existed long before you learned the rules of relationships, the patterns of attraction, or the language of desire. It is the unconscious that speaks first, long before the conscious mind can catch up. This knowing is not loud. It does not rush. It does not scream. It hums softly, resonating like a bell that has been rung in the deepest chamber of your being. There are moments in life that feel like a mirror is being held up to the soul. Not the kind of mirror that reflects your face, but one that reflects your essence. And in these moments, you meet someone, not with your eyes, but with your interior world. A sudden stillness, a strange familiarity, a wordless sense that you have not just met them, but remembered them. This is not poetic exaggeration. This is the reality of the unconscious, where symbolic memory and archetypal energy shape our emotional experiences. What you are recognizing is not their biography, but their energetic fingerprint, a pattern that has echoed through your psyche long before you ever cross paths. In this hidden layer of the psyche, there exists a map of the soul's journey, drawn in symbols, dreams, wounds, and desires. And when someone is truly meant for you, their presence activates certain coordinates on this map. You feel something shift, not because you've been conditioned to want it, but because their energy aligns with yours in a way that feels inevitable. You don't have to try. You simply respond. It's like hearing the opening note of a song you've always loved but forgotten. The melody is already inside you. They just played it out loud. We must understand that the psyche does not operate according to the rules of linear time. It sees through the eyes of myth, story, intuition. That is why the unconscious recognizes someone long before we have a conscious reason to. You may meet someone and immediately feel safe. You may feel vulnerable and open without knowing why. You may feel as though your defenses have silently dropped, not from recklessness, but from recognition. That is not weakness. It is the ancient intelligence of your inner world. The walls fall not because of charm, but because something in them speaks the language of your depths. Think of the times you've met people who said all the right things, looked perfect on paper, shared your interest, and yet nothing, no spark, no resonance, no depth. Now think of those strange, rare moments where someone enters your life and you don't know why, but everything in you pauses. You can't explain it, but you feel seen. Not the way the world sees you, but the way you wish to be seen. The part of you that you thought was invisible. This is what it means when the unconscious recognizes before the conscious does. It bypasses the surface and goes straight to the core. Often we do not trust this knowing because we have been taught to distrust ourselves. We've learned to override intuition with strategy, to silence instinct with doubt, to replace inner truth with outer validation. And so, when the soul whispers, "Pay attention," we panic, we run, we question. But the truth is that real connection doesn't demand answers, it demands presence. The conscious mind wants clarity. The unconscious seeks meaning. And meaning does not arrive through data. It arrives through depth. There's a story of a woman who boarded a delayed flight and ended up sitting next to a stranger. They spoke briefly. No grand confessions, no romantic spark, just a short conversation about books, life, and cities they'd both visited. But when she got off that plane, she wrote in her journal, "I think I just met someone important." She didn't know why. He didn't ask for her number. Months passed. Then one day, he emailed her. They had exchanged emails without thinking. That email became years of shared life. When asked how she knew, she said, "It wasn't what he said. It was the silence between us. It felt familiar, like I'd already known him in some other life." This is not fantasy. This is the voice of the unconscious speaking in images, feelings, and symbols. The sensation of having known someone before is not necessarily literal, it is archetypal. It is the psyche recognizing a pattern that feels deeply meaningful, even if you cannot explain it. And this is the tragedy of modern relationships. We've become so addicted to certainty, so afraid of the unknown, that we ignore the only part of us that truly knows when something is real. The unconscious is the storehouse of all our emotional truths, our forgotten wounds, our unresolved yearnings. And when someone's presence awakens those, we often confuse it with danger. But not all activation is negative. Sometimes what gets activated is the part of you that longs to be free, that has waited patiently in the shadows for someone who wouldn't trigger your defenses, but dissolve them. Not with force, but with familiarity. Not with charm, but with energy that mirrors your own. That is the recognition we speak of here, not romantic idealism, but psychic resonance. I wish that this morning. That is the recognition we speak of here, not romantic idealism, but psychic resonance. It's like the conversation we had this morning with Andrew before the show and the Wisdom City episode. There is a deeper intelligence at play when someone is meant for you. It is not about perfection. It is not even about ease. It is about truth. Their presence reveals truths about yourself that were once hidden, and it is not always comfortable. Sometimes the person you're meant to meet shines a light on the parts of you that you've kept buried, but instead of judging them, they hold space for them. Makes sense, doesn't it? Instead of saying, we miss you, I miss you, you never make me feel selfish again. Instead of correcting you, they understand you. And that understanding does something radical. It awakens you. We must learn to trust the subtle signals of our inner world. The tension in the chest, the tears that arrive without warning, the joy that feels unearned, the sense of safety that appears before trust has been built. These are the whispers of the unconscious guiding you toward what matters. The deeper self does not speak in language, it speaks in sensation. And when someone is meant for you, your soul speaks first. You know not because you're told. You know because you feel different, grounded, calmer, more yourself. That is the great secret. The person who is meant for you doesn't complete you. They remind you of who you were before the world told you who to be. They speak to the timeless part of you, the part untouched by trauma, by conditioning, by fear. So listen closely, not to the noise, but to the silence. Pay attention to the moments when your soul leans forward, when your breath slows, when your heart softens. These are not accidents. These are signs. And the part of you that recognizes them is the part that remembers. Before your mind can name it, your soul already knows. In the great search for love and connection, many lose themselves in the noise of longing. We are taught that love must be loud to be real, that it must strike like lightning, roar like thunder, consume like fire, that if it doesn't ache or bring you to your knees, it must not be powerful. But this idea is not born from truth. It is born from trauma, from the unresolved echoes of what we've mistaken for love in the past. When someone is truly meant for you, however, the experience is not one of chaos, but of calm, a deep and steady peace like the ocean at dawn. Not because life with them is free from challenge, but because your nervous system stops bracing for war. You rest, not in boredom, in safety. It is strange how many people associate love with anxiety, the racing heart, the second guessing, the obsessive thoughts. These are mistaken for passion. We confuse fear with excitement, tension with intensity, and emotional volatility with depth. Yet none of these are indicators of true connection. They are signs of an activated survival response. Your psyche reacting not to the other person, but to your own inner landscape. What you're feeling is not them, it is your wound. This confusion is not accidental. It is the result of stories passed down through generations. Stories where love is dramatic, where lovers suffer, where heartbreak is the cost of intimacy. We have learned to equate pain with meaning. And so when something or someone arrives that brings ease, stability, presence, we question it. It doesn't feel familiar because we have made chaos our home. But when someone is truly meant for you, their presence doesn't pull you out of yourself. It brings you back in. There is a kind of quiet recognition, not a rush of adrenaline, but the slowing of the breath. You don't need to perform, impress, or defend. You don't shrink or expand artificially to be loved. You simply are. And in being seen as you are without condition, something ancient within you exhales for the first time in years. This is not dullness. This is alignment. Real love is not the fire that burns you to ash. It is the hearth that warms you through winter. It is not the chase, but the meeting. The shared space where neither is trying to win because both already feel whole. There is a kind of wisdom in the body that responds to true connection. We often ignore this wisdom because it doesn't speak in the language of urgency. It speaks in stillness, in the way your shoulders relax when they walk in the way your voice softens, in the way you begin to dream again, not just of a future with them, but of a future for yourself. You begin to imagine in color. You begin to create. You begin to live, not in defense, but in expansion. There was once a man who had spent most of his adult life in relationships that felt like roller coasters, highs and lows, push and pull, love and withdrawal. When he finally met someone who didn't play games, who showed up with openness and consistency, he panicked. It felt like nothing, he said at first, but as weeks turned into months, he realized he had begun to sleep better. His anxiety had lessened. He had started painting again. He wasn't losing himself. He was remembering himself. This is what calm connection does. It does not erase your storms. It teaches you to weather them, not alone, but together. You begin to see that love is not supposed to be a constant test. It is not something you earn. It is something you share, something that exists not in proving, but in being. Modern psychology now supports this. Studies in attachment theory show that secure bonds tend to feel unremarkable to those raised in unpredictability. The nervous system, when addicted to highs and lows, interprets peace as dullness. But peace is not dullness. It is the necessary ground on which all else can grow. Trust, creativity, intimacy. Without peace, love becomes a battleground. With peace, love becomes a sanctuary. We must be brave enough to choose this kind of connection, to trust it, even when it feels unfamiliar, because the unfamiliar is often the healthy thing we've never known. The stability that feels boring at first may be the very medicine our soul has been aching for. We must learn to distinguish between what excites our wounds and what nurtures our wholeness. True connection does not demand that we twist ourselves into knots. It does not ask us to betray our truth for acceptance. When someone is meant for you, they will not pull you away from your essence. They will bring you closer to it. You do not become smaller, you grow. And the growth is not frantic, it is gentle, rooted, and sustainable. It is not an explosion, it is an unfolding. In this kind of love, conflict is not a threat, it is an opportunity. Disagreement doesn't fracture the bond, it strengthens it, because safety has been established. You know you can speak, cry, stumble, and still be met with care. That knowing transforms the very way you move through the world. You stop hiding, you start healing. The right person is not a savior. They are a mirror. They do not rescue you from your pain. They hold your hand while you face it. They don't fix your wounds, but they make it safe enough for you to begin that work yourself. That safety, that quiet, permission is the deepest kind of love there is. In a world that markets urgency, superficial charm, and fast gratification, we need the courage to choose differently, to pause when something feels peaceful, to lean in instead of running, to trust the quiet connection, the soft voice, the slow burn, because these are the foundations that endure. So, when you find yourself with someone who makes you feel calm rather than crazy, present rather than paranoid, inspired rather than insecure, pay attention. Don't look away. Don't label it as ordinary. Recognize it for what it is, the rare and sacred reminder that love, at its best, does not take you away from yourself. It brings you home, to be truly seen, not just in fragments or reflections, but in the fullness of your inner world, is among the rarest and most sacred of human experiences. When someone is truly meant for you, they do not ask you to become someone else. They do not mold you into their ideal, nor do they require your light to dim for their comfort. Instead, their presence becomes an invitation, a quiet, compelling pull to step more deeply into who you already are. They see the vast terrain of your soul, and rather than turning away from the darker corners, they walk toward them with curiosity and reverence. They do not shrink from your complexities, they honor them. And in that honoring, something miraculous happens. You begin to grow. There is a deep misconception that love demands sacrifice of self, that to be loved, you must change, contort, abandon parts of who you are in order to be accepted. This is not love. Who listen without trying to correct, who allow silence where others would fill the space with noise, who celebrate your evolution without fearing it will take you away from them. That kind of love is not possessive, it is liberating, and liberation is what the soul longs for more than anything else. There was once a young woman who had been told all her life that she was too much, too emotional, too intense, too ambitious. So she learned to compress herself into smaller shapes, hoping to be easier to love. And then she met someone who did not flinch at her fire, who encouraged her to speak, to weep, to dream without apology. Over time, she found that she no longer needed to ask for permission to be herself. His presence gave her no new ability, no magical gift, only the safety to return to what was already hers. That is what it means to grow without losing yourself. The soul does not crave comfort in the sense of stagnation. It craves becoming. But becoming is only possible in environments where we do not feel threatened by our own unfolding. A healthy relationship is like a fertile garden. You do not become a different plant. You simply bloom more fully. You drop the protective layers, the survival masks, the hardened shells. You allow the truth of your being to rise to the surface because you know it will be met with care, not rejection. There is a certain wisdom that arises in relationships, rooted in this kind of mutual expansion. Both people continue to evolve not away from one another, but beside one another. They do not fear each other's growth because they trust the connection is spacious enough to contain it. In this space, individuality is not seen as a threat, it is cherished. You do not lose your voice in the relationship, you find it. You do not give up your dreams. You are encouraged to pursue them with even more courage and clarity. Consider the many partnerships throughout history that have thrived not through codependence, but through mutual inspiration. Artists, writers, teachers, healers, those whose creative energy blossomed in the presence of another who saw their essence clearly. When someone is truly meant for you, your dreams do not feel lonely anymore. You no longer carry the weight of them by yourself. You are accompanied not only in the external sense, but in the deep psychic sense of being understood. This doesn't mean the journey is always smooth. Growth often brings discomfort, but the difference is this: you are not punished for changing. You are not shamed for having wounds. You are not abandoned for evolving. Instead, the right person will hold space for your transformation, even if they do not always understand it. They will walk with you through the unfamiliar not because it is easy, but because it is sacred. In this kind of connection, conflict does not lead to fragmentation, it leads to deeper intimacy. Because when both people are rooted in self awareness, they do not fear the mirror the other provides. They understand that discomfort is not always danger, it is often growth in disguise. And so they lean in, not to control, but to witness. And so when the contrast is balanced in love, then the powerful tension and the powerful sin can rise up for blessing. And so they lean in, not to control, but to witness, not to fix, but to honor, not to avoid pain, but to meet it together. And that is what makes this type of connection rare and transformative. It does not ask for perfection. It does not seek convenience. It does not demand conformity. It holds a space wide enough for the full expression of both souls, messy, radiant, flawed, and rising. There is an old truth hidden deep in the psyche. The self cannot evolve in isolation. It requires reflection. Not just any reflection, but one that sees with clarity and loves with strength. When someone is meant for you, they reflect your essence. Not your ego, not your performance, but your true nature. And in that reflection, you begin to recognize yourself again. And when you appreciate, you remember that you were always allowed to take up space, that your voice matters, that your dreams are not too big, that your past does not define your worth. You begin to reclaim the lost pieces of your identity, not because someone handed them to you, but because they stood beside you while you found them. To grow without losing yourself is the most profound form of love there is. It requires the presence of someone who is not threatened by your light, that demands it so that they make it all the more worthwhile. It requires the presence of someone who is not threatened by your life, someone who does not compete with your becoming but contributes to it, someone who is rooted enough in themselves to hold space for your unfolding without trying to control its direction. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to rise, not as a reaction, not as a defense, but as a natural movement of the soul. You grow into who you were always meant to be. And the beauty is, so do they. And the beauty is, so do they, because the relationship itself becomes an alchemical vessel, a container for mutual transformation, not out of need, but out of truth. So when someone enters your life and their presence makes you feel more alive, more grounded, more whole, not because they complete you, but because they awaken you, pause, pay attention. This is no ordinary connection. This is the kind of bond that does not pull you into orbit around another, but allows you to become the sun of your own life. And that is how you know. Not because they fit perfectly into your plans, not because they match your checklist, but because with them, you grow. Not away from yourself, but finally back into yourself. There is a rhythm to life that cannot be forced, a silent order behind the chaos we often fail to trust. Just as rivers do not carve their course in a single day, and the seed does not bloom before its season, love too arrives on its own terms. When the soul is prepared to meet it, and though the heart may long for something before its time, what is meant for you cannot truly take root until the inner soil has been cultivated. This is why the timing of love is as essential as the love itself. You may cross paths with someone who stirs something ancient within you, but if your soul or theirs has not yet learned to carry such a connection, the weight of it will feel unbearable. It is not the absence of love that creates this distance. It is the absence of readiness. There is a cruelty in the way time often separates us from what we feel so deeply. And yet, if we are honest, many of the connections that broke us were not lacking love. They were lacking maturity, emotional, psychological, and spiritual readiness. We often look back at these broken moments and say, if only they had stayed, if only I had tried harder, if only it had gone different. But what we rarely ask is, was I truly ready to receive what I was asking for? Readiness is not about external stability. It is not about having the perfect career or reaching a certain age or being free of flaws. Readiness is about alignment. It is when your inner world no longer needs to use love as a remedy for wounds it hasn't faced. It is when your need to be chosen no longer outweighs your capacity to choose yourself. It is when you no longer chase validation through another's presence, but can stand in your truth, even when alone. In that state, love is not desperation, it is recognition, and that is when timing becomes sacred. Too often people confuse fate with force. They believe that if someone is truly meant for them, they must hold on no matter what, endure no matter the pain, refuse to let go even when everything in their being screams otherwise. But this is not destiny, it is attachment. When something is meant for you, it will not require you to abandon yourself in order to keep it. And if it slips away, not because of neglect or indifference, but because either person was not ready, then that too is part of the design. Life is not punishing you, it is preparing you. There was once a story of two people who met, young, perhaps too young, and everything between them felt true. Their connection was magnetic, effortless, real. But over time, unresolved pain surfaced. Insecurities took root. The clarity they once had became clouded by fear, projection, and unmet needs. They walked away, heartbroken, but not bitter. Years passed. They each walked their own path, faced their own shadows, grew in ways they couldn't have imagined. Then, one day, they met again, and what once felt like a beautiful storm now felt like a sunrise. Gentle, luminous, warm. So the love was not new, but they were, and that made all the difference. This is the truth few want to hear. Sometimes the first meeting is not the real beginning. Sometimes the connection has to live in silence for a while so both souls can learn what it means to be whole. There is no shame in that. There is only grace in allowing life to unfold as it must. Without forcing what is not yet ready to flower, the soul has its seasons just as the earth does. And in certain seasons, you are called to retreat, to shed, to transform, not to partner. You may long for closeness while being led into solitude. You may crave another's hand while life asks you to use your own. And yet, even in these solitary seasons, something is being formed within you, a depth, a strength, a wisdom that will one day allow you to love without losing yourself, to give without grasping, to receive without fear. In our culture, we are taught to measure connection by consistency, how long it lasts, how soon it arrives, how tightly it holds. But real connection is measured by readiness, and readiness cannot be rushed. You cannot force someone to arrive before their inner work is done, and you cannot meet another at the depth you have not yet gone within yourself. That is why people fall apart even when the love is real. That is why timing matters, because love is not enough unless the soul has learned how to carry it. When someone is meant for you and both are ready, the timing feels like silence that sings. There is no grasping, no bargaining with destiny. You meet not as fragments looking for completion, but as mirrors reflecting each other's wholeness. You meet not to heal each other's wounds, but to witness the healing that has already begun. You are not projects, you are partners. And the love that arises is not fueled by need, but by knowing. You don't ask, will you stay? You say, I am here, and it is enough. There is no substitute for this kind of alignment, and no shortcut to get there. Every heartbreak before it, every detour, every lonely night serves a purpose. They are not punishments. They are preparations. Each one clears a path. Each one teaches you how to hold yourself so one day you can hold another without collapsing. So if someone once came into your life and the connection felt true but could not stay, do not grieve forever. Perhaps it was not love that failed, but timing that had not yet matured. And if you are still waiting for someone to arrive who meets you with that quiet recognition, do not rush the process. Life, become the person who can meet love without fear, who can stay when it's hard without running, who can receive without doubting they deserve it. When someone is meant for you and both souls are finally ready, the timing no longer feels like an obstacle. It becomes the very proof that this union was never random, that life, in its strange and perfect unfolding, waited until you both were whole enough to hold what was sacred between you. And in that moment, you will know, not because they say the perfect words or because the circumstances align, but because something deep within you, beyond thought, beyond fear, simply says yes.